Greetings and welcome back to this channel for another video. This video is entitled Chopped, and it is in reference to both John and Lorena Bobbitt. Now, before I proceed, let me present to you my disclaimers. First being the Fair Use Act disclaimer. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, which states allowance is made for fair use of copyrighted material for purposes of commentary, criticism, news reporting, research, education, teaching, and/or scholarship. It provides for the legal, non-licensed citation and/or incorporation of copyrighted material by others, which might be infringing under other circumstances. And next, we have the viewer discretion disclaimer. The following broadcast contains mature themes and situations intended for adults. Viewer discretion is advised. So again, we will be speaking on John and Lorena Bobbitt. Now, many of you may remember the story. However, some of you may be too young to remember. Lorena Bobbitt, who you see on the right, perhaps is to your left, depending upon your optics, alleged on the night of June 23rd, 1993, that her husband, John Wayne Bobbitt, assaulted her or raped her. In a part of that case that neither denied. After John Wayne Bobbitt climbed into bed, Lorena Bobbitt removed his member with a kitchen object. After removing his member, Lorena Bobbitt drove away, throwing his member out of the vehicle near their home in Manassas, Virginia. It was later retrieved and surgically reattached. Now, some of you perhaps may think this is a joke and I'm just making this story up. Again, and I will say this in every video, every live, I implore everyone to always do your own research, fact check, cross-reference. But unfortunately, this story is true. Surprisingly, a few months later, Lorena Bobbitt was acquitted on the charge of malicious wounding, and a jury found that John Wayne Bobbitt was not guilty of assaulting or raping Lorena. Lorena Bobbitt went on to spend 45 days in a mental hospital, and her name long remained a byword, not just for sensationalism or titillation, but more so for tragedy. Her husband had been found not guilty, and he maintained that he did not abuse her, contrary to her claims. But according to many reports, she had already won sympathy from the jury and also the nation, where some say it was due in part by changing sexual politics, as it was coined back then. Noteworthy, not long after the incident with John and Lorena Bobbitt, many of you may remember, some may not, the infamous Supreme Court confirmation hearings, where Anita Hill testified at Justice Clarence Thomas's confirmation and alleged that he harassed her. And this was placed in a marquee, if you will, the Year of the Woman in 1992. In 1993, the context of domestic violence and the phenomenon of spousal rape was much better understood. The case involving John and Lorena Bobbitt drew concern from an anti-domestic violence perspective, as advocates struggled to reconcile that cause with her specific actions. In a controversial essay that can be found on many social media outlets, to include Time, the moment exposed a class divide between privileged feminist intellectuals and the women who go home to abusive husbands, for whom the feminist revolution just hasn't come along fast enough. It is understandable to feel a ripple of glee hearing about the Bobbitts. Again, according to that essay. Years later, we saw hashtags Me Too and Time's Up, movements that brought new attention to violence between men and women alike. And the woman, once known as Lorena Bobbitt, later went by Lorena Gallo, and stated she believed it's a much safer and more equal environment. Residing in Virginia, with at that time a partner of 20 years and a daughter, volunteers at shelters for victims of domestic violence. Lorena, formerly known as Bobbitt, said that one of her missions was to educate the public, specifically young women, about the red flags in dating an abuser. Now, I'm sure many people are wondering what happened to John Bobbitt. John Bobbitt, again, who you see pictured. Again, whose member was removed when Lorena used a kitchen object to do so as he was in bed, drove off with the member, threw it out of the window. Fortunately, it was able to be reattached surgically. According to John Bobbitt, the memory that stood out mostly were the jokes. Many people and shows such as Saturday Night Live and Comic Relief performed sketches and jokes about the Bobbitts. And John was constantly in the news. Some say participating in off-color publicity stunts. Lorena was portrayed as crazy and vengeful, what every man should fear. However, many believe this case was much more complex, and many news publications left out the impetus for this crime. Again, John Wayne Bobbitt was found not guilty, and Lorena was acquitted as well. It has been said this case should have been more in the news. And again, references were made to the Anita Hill Clarence Thomas hearings in 1991. Domestic violence and marital rape. And the aspect of this particular case was said to have been downplayed, while women reporters tried their best. They claimed their male editors rejected that angle. And it was stated the case was, and I quote, a battle of the sexes. Today, the Me Too movement is still alive, and everything learned about violence against women, people, according to reports, are still disparaging this case as trivial. There were several tabloid stories which may quite possibly played a huge role in the downplay of this particular case. Even though the court case actually turned out to be quite relevant, especially with cameras being granted access in the courtroom. According to reports, multiple visits had been made to the home. And also, according to reports, some ended with arrests. And we've heard that in many, many cases where law enforcement had been summoned to homes, either by those in the home who called for assistance or perhaps concerned neighbors. Some resulted in arrests being effected, while others, the police, walked away with no arrest. Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, provided funds for shelters, rape prevention and education, including community programs to educate on domestic violence. This act was signed into law by then President Bill Clinton 8 months after the verdict of Lorena Bobbitt. After this case concluded, John and Lorena Bobbitt took different paths. Lorena returned to her maiden name and quietly rebuilt her life. She pursued college and worked to pay off debt. According to reports, John enjoyed the limelight and made appearances on The Howard Stern Show, judged contests, and, according to reports, made adult videos. The hospital that reattached his member nor his lawyer, according to reports, never received compensation. According to reports, and this again, please do your research, obsessed with the idea of actually reuniting with Lorena, asserting that it would be the ultimate forgiveness. To me, that alone is extremely bizarre. John and Lorena Bobbitt. The two you see before you. One being accused of being abused, and as a result of that abuse, while her husband was in bed, used a kitchen object to remove his member, leave the home, drive, throw out his member, where, fortunately, it was found and surgically reattached. They say truth can come in many forms. And while this story may be strange, bizarre, and far-fetched, it is absolutely true and documented. And again, this took place in Virginia. You may think, just when you've heard it all, you actually haven't. This was the case of John and Lorena Bobbitt. Thank you for tuning in, and please, because I am curious to see your comments and thoughts, especially the gentleman, how you would feel if your wife removed your member, and how your life would be afterward. Thank you for listening. Please be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Leave a comment, and if you would like, share. Until next time, be safe. Please be safe with every decision that you make. Be well and be healthier.